You know that feeling. You want to understand yourself, maybe your place in the world a bit better, but honestly, the idea of digging through piles of self-help books just feels exhausting.
Yeah, totally. So today we've got something a bit different. We're doing a deep dive straight into Ichiro Kishimi and Fumitaka Koga's book, The Courage to be Disliked.
Think of it like a shortcut, maybe.
Yeah.
Getting to some really powerful psychological ideas without all the usual jargon.
Exactly. And the way the book is set up is pretty cool. It's basically a conversation.
Right, between this young guy, full of questions, and a philosopher.
And they really get into some fundamental stuff. Happiness, relationships, how we grow, all seen through the lens of Alfred Adler's individual psychology.
And it really does challenge some common ideas, doesn't it? Things we just sort of assume.
Definitely. So our mission today is to pull out the key insights from the first five nights, as they call them in the book.
We've got the source material here with some great examples and explanations. The goal is to make these ideas really practical, stuff you can actually think about applying in your own life.
Let's do it.
Okay, let's dive in. First night, and this one. Well, it might just shake things up a bit. It's called Deny Trauma.
Yeah, that title grabs you, right? The core concept here is pretty radical. It suggests that past events, even really tough, traumatic ones, don't have to determine who you are now or what your future holds.
Okay, hang on. So Lyrian psychology, as the book explains it, says we choose how we interpret the past.
Essentially, yes. We choose the meaning we assign to past events, and that choice shapes our current feelings and actions. It's quite different from, say, the Freudian idea that trauma inevitably leaves these deep, lasting scars you can't escape.
I see. So in the book, the young man is basically saying, but my past did make me this way. Look at these negative experiences.
Exactly. He's holding on to that cause and effect idea. But the philosopher pushes back, saying, well, hold on, you have agency in how you frame that story.
And that brings in Adler's concept of lifestyle.
Yeah, lifestyle.
Yeah.
And it doesn't mean, your house or car. It's your fundamental way of seeing and being in the world, your pattern.
A pattern you've chosen.
That's the key. It's a chosen orientation. And because it's chosen, you can choose differently. You can adopt new perspectives and change that lifestyle.
Okay, but the young guy resists that, understandably, thinking about people who've been through terrible things.
Of course. And the philosopher's response is quite direct, almost challenging. He suggests that sometimes people might unconsciously choose to believe they're broken by the past.
Why? As a kind of excuse.
Perhaps. Maybe it feels safer, or it absolves them of the difficult work of changing in the present. It's a provocative point. Let's look at the example they use, Alex.
Okay.
So Alex is 35, grew up with an alcoholic father who constantly belittled him. Now, Alex connects his current low self-esteem, his avoidance of leadership roles, directly back to that. He sees it as trauma that dictates his present.
That sounds pretty straightforward, cause and effect. Dad was awful, so Alex struggles now.
That's the common view. But the Adlerian take is different. It doesn't excuse the father's behavior at all, but it questions the direct, unavoidable causal link.
So it's saying Alex's current insecurity isn't just because of his dad.
It's saying his insecurity is maintained by his ongoing choice to interpret his past through a lens of inadequacy. He keeps reinforcing the belief that he's not good enough based on that history.
Wow. Okay, so how does Alex actually apply this? How does he break free, practically speaking?
The practical path for Alex is to actively reframe that narrative. So instead of only remembering the belittling, he needs to consciously seek out and focus on moments of resilience from his past. Times he did cope or succeed or showed strength despite his father.
Find the counter evidence, sort of.
Exactly, and focus on his current strengths too. By doing that, he starts to reshape his lifestyle, his core beliefs. It takes courage, the courage to let go of that familiar trauma story that, in a way, might feel comfortable.
The courage to see himself differently.
That's it. And then he can approach things like leadership with a newfound confidence based on this revised understanding of himself.
That's powerful. It really puts the agency back with the individual. So, for you listening, what's a way to start using this idea?
Well, maybe think about a past event you feel still impacts you negatively. Grab a journal, maybe.
Yeah.
Write down the story you usually tell yourself about it, your current interpretation.
Okay.
Then actively challenge it. Ask yourself, is this the only way to see it? Are there other perspectives? Did I maybe develop some strength or learn something valuable because of it, even if it was hard?
Just questioning the narrative?
Exactly. That questioning can be the first step away from feeling determined by the past and towards feeling empowered in the present.
Okay, moving on to the second night. This one's another big claim. All problems are interpersonal relationship problems.
Yeah, it sounds sweeping, doesn't it? But the idea behind it is really insightful.
What's the core insight?
That basically all human struggles, even the ones that feel intensely private, like, say, deep anxiety or feelings of inferiority, ultimately originate in our relationships with other people.
So even when I'm alone, feeling anxious, it's somehow about others. The young man in the book pushes back on this too, right?
He does. He thinks, surely I have problems that are just mine. But the philosopher argues that even those solitary feelings are tangled up with others.
How so?
Because they often stem from comparing ourselves, consciously or unconsciously, to others. Or worrying about how others see us, fearing their judgment, wondering if we measure up. It's fundamentally social.
That feeling of inadequacy.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're usually measuring against something or someone, even if it's just in your head.
Exactly. Feelings like inferiority or even superiority, they don't really exist in a vacuum. They need a comparison point. They're relational.
Okay, so if these problems are rooted in relationships, what's the solution, according to Adler?
Well, two key things emerge. First, cultivating genuine self-acceptance. That means valuing yourself as you are, without needing constant validation or approval from others.
Easier said than done, maybe.
Oh, absolutely. And second, focusing on your own tasks, which we'll get to more in the next night. But essentially, it's about concentrating on what you can control, your own actions and efforts, and letting go of the emotional burden of managing others' opinions of you.
The book uses stage fright as an example, right?
Yeah.
That feels pretty personal.
It does. But the philosopher reframes it. Is it the stage itself you fear? Or is it the potential judgment, the negative evaluation from the audience?
Okay. It's the fear of what they might think.
Exactly. It's interpersonal at its core. Let's use another example to make it clear. Priya.
Okay, tell me about Priya.
Priya's a 28-year-old graphic designer. She gets really anxious before presenting her work to clients. She sees it as a personal flaw, like she's just not a confident person.
But the Adlerian view would say it's not just her.
Right. It's not solely an internal failing. Her anxiety likely stems from that fear of negative judgment. What if they hate the design? What if they think she's not good enough?
And maybe comparing herself to some mythical, perfect designer.
Precisely. Comparing herself to an ideal, worrying about criticism, fearing disapproval, it's all rooted in that interpersonal dynamic.
So what's the practical application for Priya? How does she use these ideas?
For Priya, it involves, well, first, actively practicing self-acceptance, maybe using affirmations, reminding herself of her skills, the effort she puts in, acknowledging her worth separate from the client's reactions.
Okay.
Then she needs to focus on her task. Her job is to create the best design she can. It's not her job to control the client's feelings or guarantee they'll love it.
That's a key distinction.
It is.
Yeah.
And she also needs to consciously stop that comparison game with her colleagues or ideals. Focus on her own work, her own process.
And the idea is, if she does that,
the hope is that by detaching her self-worth from their potential judgment and focusing on her own controllable actions, her anxiety around presentations will lessen. Her confidence can grow from the inside out based on her own efforts.
Makes sense. So for you listening, if you deal with something like anxiety, what's the starting point?
Try to trace its roots. Pick a specific struggle. Ask yourself honestly, what social fears are connected to this? Whose judgment am I worried about? What comparison am I making?
Become aware of the relational aspect.
Yes. And then start small. Practice some self-affirmation and consciously try to shift your focus back to your actions, your effort in the situation, rather than getting lost in predicting or worrying about how others might react.
That leads us really nicely into the third night. Discard other people's tasks. This sounds potentially revolutionary for relationships.
It really can be. It's incredibly liberating, potentially. The core idea is the separation of tasks.
Separation of tasks. Okay, what does that mean exactly?
It means that each person is responsible only for their own choices, their own actions, their own feelings, the things they can actually directly control.
And conflicts often happen when we cross those lines, when we try to manage someone else's responsibilities.
Exactly. Think about how often we get tangled up trying to make someone else happy or change their behavior or fix their problems. That's taking on their tasks.
The young man in the book struggles with this, right? Feeling obligated to please his boss or feeling responsible for his friend's choices.
Yes, he feels that weight. And the philosopher draws a crucial distinction.
Which is?
You can choose to offer help, you can choose to act considerately towards your boss, but ensuring their happiness or controlling their decisions is not your task. Your responsibility ends with your own actions and intentions.
That's a boundary.
A clear boundary. And the philosopher points out that truly living this separation requires something specific.
Ah, yes, the courage to be disliked.
That's the one. Because when you stop trying to manage everyone else's feelings or responsibilities, not everyone will like it. You might upset the status quo.
People might be used to you carrying their load. Let's use the example of Mark.
Okay, Mark. He's 40, has a teenage daughter, Lily. He's constantly battling with her about phone use versus studying. He feels it's his job, his task, to make her study.
Which leads to fights, nagging.
Constant conflict. But from the separation of tasks perspective, Mark is trying to do Lily's task.
Studying is her task. Her education is her responsibility.
Exactly. Mark's task is different. His task is to provide support, guidance, resources, maybe set expectations, discuss consequences.
Offer help, create a good environment.
Yes, but the choice to study, the effort involved, the consequences of not studying, that's ultimately Lily's domain.
So how does Mark apply this? What does he do differently?
He shifts his focus entirely onto his tasks. He makes sure she has what she needs, quiet space, maybe offers help if asked. But he stops the nagging, the controlling, the constant battles over the phone.
He states his piece, maybe, but then let's go.
Right. He might say calmly, I'm concerned about your grades, Lily, and I'm here to support you, but managing your study time is your choice. He separates his responsibility from hers.
And the effect.
Often, paradoxically, it reduces the conflict, and it can empower the other person, Lily, in this case, to actually take ownership because the power struggle is removed. Mark could use this at work too, you know. Focusing on his own performance instead of stressing about his boss's mood, realizing the boss's emotional state is the boss's task.
Okay, this is really practical. So for you listening, how can you start applying this separation of tasks?
Think about a relationship or situation where there's recurring conflict. Try making a list. 2 columns. In one, write down what are genuinely your responsibilities, your actions, your choices, your words.
Okay.
In the other column, list what you think are the other person's responsibilities, their feelings, their choices, their reactions, their outcomes.
See it clearly on paper.
Yes. And then make a conscious effort to focus your energy only on your column. Practice letting go of the need to control or fix what's in their column. It takes practice.
Definitely takes courage. Okay, fourth night. This one asks, where the center of the world is. Sounds existential.
Ha! A little.
Yeah.
But it's really about perspective. The core idea is simple but profound. You are not the center of the universe. Nobody is.
We all operate from our own subjective viewpoint.
Exactly. And the book argues that constantly seeking to be special, needing to be the center of attention, that drive actually leads to insecurity because you become dependent on external validation.
Chasing applause, basically.
Right. And you can never fully control that. So instead of striving to be the center, Adler proposes cultivating what he calls community feeling.
Community feeling, what does that involve?
It's about contributing to others, finding your place as part of a larger community. Contributing selflessly, not for praise or recognition, but because it fosters a genuine sense of belonging and purpose.
A purpose that comes from within, from connection, not from being singled out.
Precisely. The book uses that lovely metaphor of life as a dance.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
The real joy isn't performing for an audience, hoping they approve. The joy is in the act of dancing, engaging with the music, with others on the floor. Your value isn't dependent on the applause.
It's intrinsic to participation. But the young man worries, doesn't he, that this might kill ambition. If you're not trying to be special, why strive?
That's a natural concern. But the philosopher argues that ambition and community feeling can coexist. You can still aim high, pursue goals, strive for excellence.
But the reason shifts.
Exactly. The motivation shifts from needing external validation, wanting to be better than others, to an intrinsic desire to contribute, to create something meaningful, alongside that sense of connection.
Let's make it concrete. The example of Emma, the nurse.
Right. Emma's 32, a nurse. She feels unseen, unappreciated. Patients rarely say thanks. Colleagues seem to get more recognition. She craves being seen as special, and this makes her feel resentful.
Her happiness is tied to that external feedback she's not getting.
Exactly. She's seeking validation from the outside, wanting to be the center of appreciation. The Adlerian view suggests that's the source of her unhappiness.
So how does Emma shift using this community feeling idea?
The practical application for her is to consciously shift her focus away from seeking recognition and towards the inherent value and satisfaction in the act of caregiving itself.
Finding meaning in the work, not the praise.
Yes. Finding purpose in genuinely helping a patient, maybe taking extra time to listen, mentoring a newer colleague, finding satisfaction in their growth. Doing it because it aligns with her values as a caring nurse, not because she expects a thank you card or an award.
So the reward becomes internal.
It becomes intrinsic to the contribution, and over time, this can build a deeper, more resilient sense of purpose. She also needs to stop the comparison game. Someone else's recognition doesn't take away from her contribution. This shift can actually lead to more genuine connections, ironically.
Interesting. So for you listening, how do you start cultivating this?
Yeah.
Detaching from needing to be the center.
Try this. Identify one small thing you can do today or each day as an act of contribution with absolutely no expectation of thanks or recognition.
Like what?
Could be tiny. Holding a door with a genuine smile. Offering a sincere compliment. Sharing useful info with a colleague. Tidying a communal space. Anything where the focus is purely on the contribution itself.
And then notice how it feels.
Yeah. Afterwards, just pause for a moment. Reflect. How did that feel? Notice any shift, however small, in your sense of purpose or connection, just from that simple, selfless act.
Okay, that brings us to the final night we're covering, the fifth night, to live in earnest in the here and now.
This feels like a culmination in a way. It ties a lot together.
The core idea seems straightforward, but maybe hard to practice.
It is. The insight is that happiness, meaning fulfillment, they aren't found primarily in achieving future goals or endlessly analyzing the past. They're found in engaging fully, earnestly with the present moment.
Living right now.
Yes. Adler, through the philosopher, presents life not as a line towards a destination, but as a series of dots, a series of present moments. Each moment has potential.
And how do you unlock that potential?
Through self-acceptance, embracing who you are right now, imperfections included, and through that community feeling, that active contribution which is talked about, living authentically in the present.
But the young man is still worried, right? He fears that without some big future goal, life feels kind of pointless. Like just existing day to day isn't enough.
It's a common fear. That meaning only comes from grand achievements. But the philosopher counters that meaning arises from the quality of your engagement with the present. The small, earnest acts.
How you do things now matters more than what you might achieve later.
That's the essence. And again, he brings up the courage to be disliked. Living authentically now might mean not conforming, not always pleasing others, which takes courage.
Let's look at Liam, the aspiring writer example.
Okay, Liam. He's 25, desperately wants to be a published writer, feels his life is meaningless until that happens. He's fixated on future fame and bogged down by past rejections.
So he's completely missing the present.
Totally. The Adlerian view is that he's sacrificing the potential for meaning now by pinning everything on a future outcome and dwelling on past setbacks.
So what's the practical shift for Liam? How does he live in the here and now?
He needs to intentionally shift his focus to the act of writing itself. Find joy in the process, not just the potential outcome.
Right, for the sake of writing today.
Exactly. Maybe commit to writing daily just for the satisfaction of creating. Perhaps share his work on a blog, finding purpose in expressing himself and maybe connecting with a few readers now.
Engage with the writing community.
Yes. Join a group, offer feedback to others contributing. And when he gets criticism, learn to accept it calmly as feedback on the work, not a judgment on his entire worth.
So finding meaning in the process, the connection, the learning, right now.
Precisely. By engaging fully in these present activities, he can discover purpose and fulfillment now, regardless of whether future fame ever arrives.
That's a big shift.
Yep.
So for you listening, how can you start practicing this living in the here and now?
It can start very simply. Pick one routine activity you do every day. It could be making coffee, washing dishes, walking somewhere, working on a specific task.
Okay.
And just for that activity, make a conscious effort to be fully present. Pay attention to the sensations, the process itself. Try to do it mindfully without judging yourself or letting your mind race ahead to the next thing or dwell on the past.
Just be in that moment with that task.
Yes, and afterwards, just like before, take a moment, reflect. How did that feel? Did focusing on the process just for that short time change your experience of it? Did it feel more fulfilling, maybe?
These are powerful ideas.
Yeah.
So wrapping up our deep dive into these first 5 nights.
Yeah, we've covered a lot.
Yeah.
Denying the deterministic power of trauma, embracing present choice.
Seeing all problems as fundamentally interpersonal and the need for self-acceptance.
The freedom that comes from separating tasks, focusing on your own responsibilities.
Realizing you're not the center of the world and finding purpose in community feeling.
And finally, the importance of living earnestly, finding meaning right here in the present moment.
And the key thing is, these aren't just, philosophical abstractions. They're presented as practical shifts in perspective.
Absolutely. Ways to potentially navigate life with maybe a bit more clarity, less burden, and a greater sense of your own agency.
So maybe a final thought for you to chew on as you go about your day.
Yeah, consider this. Which of these 5 nights, these core ideas, really resonated with you? Which one sparked something, maybe felt a bit uncomfortable or particularly insightful?
And then think, what if you made just one small shift in your perspective or your actions related to that specific area?
How might that single small change start to ripple outwards? How could it affect how you see yourself, how you interact with others?
What's one tiny step aligned with that principle that you could maybe experiment with starting today? Could that be a doorway to some real growth, a more engaged life?
It's worth pondering. We really encourage you to keep exploring these ideas, see how they fit or don't fit with your own unique life and experiences.
Absolutely. This has just been a starting point for the exploration.